our names.
And you're live.
No, we're good. So welcome to the Wednesday, November 16th meeting of the Finance Board. Our first item on the agenda tonight is the Pentucket Regional Agreement, and also the State of the School District meeting, which took place a couple weeks ago on November 1st. The school district invited the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committees from the three-member towns to a meeting, and they gave us the updates, the financial updates of what they anticipate for the year. I thought it was a pretty helpful presentation. It really summarized specifically issues that the school anticipates having to contend with for the upcoming budget season. So Kathy Castronellis represented our Board of Selectmen at that meeting. The other two towns also had their board members there. I was there, Sarah McGrath was there. And all three of the school regions, town administrators or town managers were there. So Rebecca Oldham was there for our town as well. So it was well represented. It was, I think, a good start of the communication that we've been seeking after last year when there was a bit of a struggle with the budget. So with that, Sarah, I'll hand it to you if you have anything else to say about the meeting and also about the agreement, the regional agreement.
No, I second everything you say. I think it was a great meeting. I think I learned a lot. I think their presentation was thorough. I think it was great. I think if anybody in town watches it, it's going to be online. So.
And also the slides that they reviewed are all on the school's website.
Right.
Not the town's, right?
They will be under the packet items for the Board of Selectmen,
Okay.
but I can place them somewhere else if that would be.
Oh, no, that's fine. I think the logical place would be to go to the school's website for it, but so all the slides that they discussed are there as well. And we expect ongoing discussions as well, so, sorry,
Yeah.
back to the agreement.
No, you're fine. So I did take an extensive look at the regional agreement. I did make some notes based on the meeting that we had with the three towns, and just wanted to kind of get all of our thoughts and ideas, because when we have our joint meeting next Monday with the Board of Selectmen, we should present these to see if they have any concerns, because West Newbury also has a meeting on the 21st, and that's when they'll submit their final changes. And I think Merrimack's meeting was this Monday, so I think we're all kind of wrapping up at the same time to put this forward so we can make sure it's on the town meeting in May. Well, April. So if you want, I'll start with my first note. We'll go from there.
Sure.
So on page 1, section 1, on letter D, it's a kind of a question. I didn't know if anybody knew the answer, where it says that no town shall hold, that secretary positions should all be revolving, with one position being from each town. I just didn't know if we knew if Groveland had ever been a chair of the school committee.
My knowledge, the best of my knowledge, not in the last 3 years.
Okay, but,
It was held,
It was,
new person this year from West Newbury, I believe, and the last 2 years prior were held by the same person in Merrimack.
I think you have that flipped. I think currently it's
Merrimack.
Merrimack, and the last 2 years was West Newbury.
Okay.
And I don't know who was the year before that.
okay,
But obviously, when no one is enforcing that kind of rotating chair and vice chair and secretary positions, hopefully it's not that someone's not willing to step up, which would be a real disaster.
yeah.
Then I don't know what to do. You can't force someone to do something, right?
No, of course not. And if they're not ready because they're new, I mean, I understand all of that.
Right. But that potentially leaves us in a very vulnerable position.
Right. Yeah. So it was just a question. I just didn't know if anybody knew the answer. That was my only comment about that one section. On page 2, section IV, letter B, was, in that section, it says that there shall be not less than one elementary school in each member town. When we had the meeting, it was brought up that should we leave room in case we ever wanted to regionalize our elementary schools? So I just didn't know if that was something that we should put in there, just in general, that if we ever needed to, I mean, right, it's a lot of money for, there's technically 4 elementary schools to be replaced, just something to consider.
Yeah. Try to get some people to cross the water.
Yeah, my feeling is that would be such a long strategic kind of change to make, that maybe that kind of change gets made at the time that it's necessary.
I'm
I don't
fine
know.
with that. It was
Yeah,
something
no,
brought
it's a
up,
good-
so just wanted to bring up to all of you to make sure you all were aware. Page 2, section IV, letter C. I'm actually going to ask Ellen this lovely question, put her on the spot. Do you have a copy of the lease agreement between the district and the town? No? Do you know who should have one? Okay. Okay.
It does exist. I had a copy
Okay.
at one time to bring down with me when I went to talk to some school officials at Bagnell. So I understood the, agreements of the lease. So it does exist.
So at some point, if Rebecca or Ellen will look for it. Because I don't know if some of that, the other questions that follow this will kind of resolve itself in that lease agreement.
And I have it.
You do? Fantastic.
I have the one that was signed for the agreement made in 2013.
Okay.
If there's any other
Amendments or,
regulations or terminations or,
well, how long is the lease? Is it a 10-year lease?
yeah, I'm gonna have to look through it a little bit.
Your mic's not on? Is your mic on, Rebecca?
Your mic is
You talking to
muted,
Rebecca?
my friend.
Your mic. Now that you're done.
I did find it. I will look through it and get the specifics while we continue on this conversation.
Thank you so much. All right. Page 5, section B111, letter A. We had brought up that the capital plan, that they would be providing that to us by January 15th. The question is, since we start our capital plan so early, should they be providing it to us well before January 15th? So I just, there's a question on that, and also to increase the capital projects up to $20,000 that they would cover.
I did find out it's 20 years, so that's,
Oh, the 5 years would change to 20 years?
so that's about to expire.
Okay.
The original agreement was 2020. Oh, yes.
So 33, so we have a little bit of time? Okay.
Well locked in is what she's saying.
Fantastic, all right. Well, that's good. Anyone have any questions, concerns, they think a reasonable date that they would recommend besides January 15th? So that we can incorporate it better into our capital plan? December 15th? November 15th? About the.
Section
the-
5.
Yeah, about the school providing their capital plan earlier than January 15th.
I think that when, if I recall correctly, the issue was the fact that we don't receive their plan until we're already supposed to, by our bylaw, have approved ours before we enter into our budget season. So I think that between Merrimack and the town of West Newbury, we were just hoping that we could get that information sooner so that when we start our capital planning process in September, October, we're able to include that information and it's not, and the funding sources can be identified more clearly instead of after the fact.
Sure. Perfect. Also, the district is supposed to provide each town with a maintenance plan of the buildings. Year-end maintenance report shall be provided to each town identifying cost and maintenance performed. Groveland specifically hasn't seen that, about what they have repaired and things that we need to repair in years going forward. So. Also, the other section about annual report containing the detailed financial statement showing methods by which the annual charges assessed against each town were computed, that they're supposed to provide that deemed necessary by the regional district committee or by the selectmen and/or finance committee of each member town. That they're supposed to provide that every year. So not anything that needs to change in that section, just something that needs to be followed, and if we're not getting that, we need to just be vocal about that. Page 7, section X, II, that talks about a regional advisory committee, that they'll meet from time to time. I don't believe we have. Do we have a regional advisory committee?
I was just about to ask who's on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so my question was, it says that they should meet from time to time with the regional district committee chair, the superintendent, or business manager to discuss that. My thought is that it should be changed to town administrator / manager, so that all 3 towns can meet. I mean, everything should be facilitated through our town administrator, and so that was a change. I thought that should be changing. Then what else? Oh, page 7, section XII, letter, number 1. It says the budget process shall initiate annually in December, and shall provide an opportunity for the selectmen and finance committee of each member town to have input in its preparation, which I think is great. I think the only change I would make is that if we could have, which we are doing this year, to have 1 meeting instead of 3 separate meetings, so all information is provided the same, we're all there at the same time, we're not asking the same questions and things like that. So that was something I would change, that we would do that all together every year. Page 8, section XII, then also, I just wanted to call attention that it says, if in the opinion the Board of Selectmen and/or Finance Committee of any towns that the budget will not fit the budgetary capabilities of the town, they can request a special meeting to discuss the budget. I just think that it's good information to have, that if it's something that we need to do, that
Every year.
that we make sure that we do that. And then the section about amendments, that this has to be approved by town meeting, so just to keep in mind that if we want to make any changes, that we just keep on top of this and we make sure we present it on Monday. I know that's a short amount of time. But just to make sure it ends up for the town meeting. And then the last section, page 10, section XIV, letter C. And then it just says, lists all these lovely people that it meets with, that the agreement shall be reviewed. I just wanted to add in it that they should add a finance committee member from each town to be represented on that meeting. But those were all my changes. I welcome any concerns, feedback, any of the above.
So these suggested changes will be brought up on Monday in our joint meeting and then discussed from there?
Yeah. And if anybody had any other ones besides that, you know.
Yeah. I think that they're all valid. I think that they're pretty minor, or just bringing things up, except for the $20,000 in capital projects, which seems reasonable.
Right,
To
Merrimack
change that
and West
threshold.
Newbury.
Does that seem?
For the school side, so currently we're only responsible for anything on, over 10,000.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, but this was also signed in 2019, probably negotiated early 19, 18. Prices were low, supplies were plentiful. Live in a different world now. I mean, $20,000 is, pretty close to the equivalent of 10 just a few years ago, with the rising cost of everything. So I don't think it's unreasonable to, push that limit higher.
And the other two towns seemed agreeable to that when we talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, simple carpet is 10 grand nowadays
Right.
once you install it, right?
And we're talking about maybe potentially increasing our threshold as it stands at $10,000 for being qualified as a capital project. For the very reasons you're discussing.
Yeah. And it should all be consistent. So, okay. Very good. The school also at that meeting, they went through and really talked specifically about the changes in the budget when the override failed last year and what changes were instituted. And those positions that were cut can be reviewed. They cut across the board, and as of now, the school, and I feel our town too, really, the positions are bare bone. There's no more positions at this point in time to cut from the elementary schools, certainly. And here at Town Hall too, we have lean departments, we have lean staff. There's really nowhere to cut. So it's going to be an ongoing conversation, but that's what we asked for. Well, and this actually leads us to the next agenda item, which is the Joint Finance Board Board of Selectmen meeting, which is scheduled for the 21st. And that's being posted as a joint meeting, so we don't need to post that specifically
Correct.
for our board. So will we, or does this board, and do you, Rebecca, think that we should invite our school committee reps to that meeting, or do you think it's soon in the process for that?
I think it would be more productive to have that initial meeting, because it will be one of the first meetings where you'll be able to come together with the Board of Selectmen. You're identifying your financial goals for fiscal year '24. You're identifying potentially policies that you might want to see adopted, and you're also discussing individually your needs or what you would like to see from the regional agreement, and coming together and having that conversation so that both the Board of Selectmen and Finance Board are on the same page might be a little bit more just more productive than kind of battling it out in front of a school committee member who might be a little off-put by, you know, well, which direction does the town want us to go in, or what are we looking at? So it might just be a better way to get a better understanding, and then from moving that forward, you'll have that structure.
Okay. That makes sense. I do want to make sure that we keep an open dialogue with the school committee. Last year, it was pretty far into the budget season when we tried to have an open dialogue, and, you know, that was when I went to several public comments and made my comment that we should have had this conversation sooner. One thing that I've been repeatedly saying is that the school committee, I completely understand, school committee representatives ran for the school committee in order to support the school. They're there advocating for the school. But one thing that I thought was just missing was the other side of the conversation. The town's budget, when 2/3 of it goes to the school, the people that are voting for the school's budget don't then see the remaining budget and what the town has left, and how the town is trying to carefully allocate those resources on behalf of the residents and the taxpayers of Groveland. And there's a question of needs versus wants, wants versus needs. How do we evenly distribute that? And I just think it would be a really helpful exercise. We see both sides, the town side and the school side. We see the in-depth, what the school is really seeking and needing. And I just think it would be really helpful for at least our representatives from Groveland to see our conversation, our other side of the budget, and why we are trying to, you know, support education while also supporting the other causes of the town.
If I could make a suggestion, maybe the best part would be when we do our budget presentation at the end of January, that as per the schedule with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Board, because then we're actually presenting what we're estimating for revenue and what we're getting a general sense of in terms of what our expenditures will be, so they can really see the true impact, whereas this initial meeting on the 21st is really just strategizing, and the numbers are not really finalized at this point in time, or even estimated, really.
That would make sense. And maybe we should just keep them in the loop on the earlier side of the equation to just let them know that we think that would be a helpful exercise, and we think that would be a good time to anticipate that side of the conversation. So I kind of segued from the school into the meeting on the 21st. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what we should, how or what we should prepare, or what we should expect, or what you expect our goals to be for that meeting?
So essentially, in former years past, as part of the budget instructions, the Board of Selectmen have put together, as part of the budget guide, and the finance director has included such, the statement of goals to be used as guidance in developing what it is and priorities of the department. So I can display what we've had done in former years as a segue into that conversation and see exactly what you all think.
Jim wanted to talk about it, and I thought Rebecca would have some comments on it. Meeting minutes, we can talk about that.
Sure, you want to do that?
We have to table it because
Yeah.
Melissa's not here.
So I'll make a motion, well, do you want me to table it? Make a motion to table?
Sure.
I'll make a motion to table our meeting minutes till our next meeting.
Second.
Perfect. Roll call vote?
We don't need to roll
Oh,
call
yeah.
because nobody's remote,
Nobody's
so
remote.
all in favor?
Check. That's off the list.
And I wasn't taking, usually Melissa does our minutes, and I think it's okay because this will be recorded, so we can always, write minutes from the follow-up rather than during the meeting, which is a whole lot easier.
Sure, absolutely.
Oh,
Thank you.
I guess you always got extras, huh?
I love extras.
so this is in the beginning of the budget book. There's always a statement of goals for the year. And these goals are primarily consistent with the goals that were already in existence?
Yes, they seem to be the goals that have been used for the last 5 years or so. Which is why I thought it might be good to take another look at.
Yeah. So just for the benefit of who may be watching this meeting, that the goals are broken down into 6 categories: financial, economic development, neighborhood enhancement, community development, public safety, and governmental philosophy. Those are the broad categories of the goals that the town that the town aims to be mindful of in developing budgets for the year. And I think that they all remain applicable. I mean, I'll read through the text more carefully and bring any suggestions, and I would encourage everybody here to do that as well. But the 6 broad groups seem on point, and I wouldn't expect any of that to change. I don't know if you have other feelings about that, Rebecca. I did go to 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. I went to on Saturday, there was the annual meeting. I had talked about it in this meeting, and I wasn't planning to dedicate my Saturday, but I did end up dedicating a 75-degree Saturday to go to Sharon, Massachusetts, to the annual meeting for the Association of Town Finance Committees. And I sat through a budget session, and they talked a lot about the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, have stated goals that you incorporate into your budget book to have their sort of standard, seal of approval. And one thing that keeps coming up, every sort of Association of Town Finance Committee meeting that I've been to, webinar that I've been to, they all say, we're all doing the same thing. Don't reinvent the wheel every single time. Take the standard, take the award-winning budget book, go through it, see what makes sense to your community, and share it and borrow it and openly do that. It's not like you're stealing, information. They're very open about developing procedures and protocol and sharing among the groups. It's fun to go to these meetings and hear everybody sort of echoing. They say, the schools all want money, and they all have sort of the same
Issues.
and underlying themes, and so
Yeah, most of us are in the same boat. It's just that some of us have more
some of us.
ability to come up with the revenue needed to
That's right.
support.
That's right. Like they were talking about, adding a meals tax and having that be this one budget presentation that I sat through. They were talking about adding a meals tax and having that be a dedicated stream to fund a capital need or to fund their OPEB liability, and, things that we just don't have the ability to really implement. So
You could, but I think they'd be counterproductive to your goals. They just,
in this community, in this situation, I think that we're taking other steps. Rebecca at our last meeting talked about the $191,000 grant that she received that the town received to, do a study on the Center Street land. I think being thoughtful, being really strategic about how to maybe implement more revenue is the way to go.
being more
I think it's going.
proactive.
I think it's going to take. It's a time. It takes time, and it's a process. And I think that we have a planner and a town administrator to get us going into that direction. But the meeting was really interesting. I enjoyed it. They talked about a budget, and actually, I feel like I'm full of segues today, but that brings us to the town manager that did the budget presentation kept talking about it all goes back to financial policies. Everything that they do goes back to their policies, and once you have solid policies in place, then all of these other conversations, you just refer back to the policies. And I know that we started doing a revamp of our financial policies a few years ago. Then part of my idea of the DLS report was to also make suggestions of financial policies and sort of get us going into that direction, and having a TA on board was also to get us to do the policies. So now Rebecca, along with Ellen, has done a draft of that, and that's something that we're going to talk about tonight too. But again, it goes back to what I learned at the annual meeting and at other meetings too. Don't reinvent the wheel. The DLS has recommended policies on their website, and then Rebecca's policy summary document also referred to many, Mass General Law. So they're out there. There's legal guidance and there's DLS guidance. It's just a matter of pulling together what fits for us and our group and putting it together. So I'm glad that we've got the policies going underway too. So we just have a little bit of a moment to get some data up on the screen so that we can review policies and the capital plan.
Okay, so you're good with the goals as stated, and we continue to reinforce these goals, and we would like to continue to proceed with.
I think that the 6 broad categories for goals are on point. I'll go through before the 21st and carefully read the text and see if we have, if there's any other guidance or feedback. But I think that they seem to be comprehensive.
And I don't necessarily see a problem with them either. I just think that it's important that we understand what we're stating as our goals, and that we continue to reflect upon them to make sure that they are in fact still relevant and we want to move forward.
Yep. So while you were setting this up, Rebecca, I was talking a little bit about the meeting that I went to last weekend, and that there was an ongoing reference to the need for financial policies. So that brings us, ooh, I feel like I'm at the eye doctor when it goes, is it clear now? And I think that to take the policies, the recommendations, I'll hand it over to you, but you were talking about taking the recommendations from the DLS, and also when I looked through them, there was references to Mass General Law, and it just seems that it's more consolidating information that's out there rather than just reinventing policies and making sure that they apply to us.
Very much so. So in the process of going through the capital plan and you know, having meetings with the Allen Town Accountant, we were sitting down and we were just like, all right, well, where should we be? What should we be doing? What are the benchmarks that we should be hitting? And so it just kept on being something that kept on getting brought up in our conversations over and over and over again. And we're like, well, this isn't really helpful. So we should have those identified. So in the process of even this past year's audit, there were mentions of making sure that we were getting our reconciliation process done accordingly, and turnovers accordingly, and anti-fraud policies, and then with the capital planning. So it just kept on becoming a reoccurring theme. So when we were looking at other communities and what they had done, they had utilized the same program that we did with our financial management, utilizing DLS, and they come in and they give you some feedback in terms of what you currently have for your policies, what you're looking to achieve, and some best management practices. So we went through their template, if you will, for a bunch of different communities, and we kind of picked and chose what made sense for Groveland. All of the policies are relatively the same across the board. We even, as we scroll through, like the chairwoman was saying, we would take their same format with their mentioning of the Massachusetts General Law or any other best management practice or any other material that DLS or DOR has issued, and included that as a reference, so that in the future, if somebody were to say, why would you choose 3%, what made that number stick out, and they'd be able to click on that and they would be able to see that, you know, it is preferred that you are within this range, this is why, or there's a statute that requires you to do this. So we kind of went and we amended the policy where needed to reflect current practices that we have and current practices that we would like to see improved. We discussed this with the town accountant, the town treasurer, as well as the assessing manager. We also discussed these policies with the water and sewer superintendent, because there are sections that refer to retained earnings and also indirect costs and allocations of such. So we'd really like the town to consider moving forward with these policies. It's something that we feel as though would give us a lot of guidance in terms of what we do every day. It would also reinforce what we do every day. A lot of times people are like, well, why are you doing this? You just you want to add extra paperwork, or you want to do that. And it's like, well, no, the town accountant needs this paperwork, but then the treasurer needs this paperwork. And so it's really important that you're giving people the information that they need in order to do their job thoroughly. So it just reinforces what we do on a day-to-day basis without having to, justify, and it gives us that justification by having that document. And it's also just good financial practices. And plus, as we look at our bond rating and there's a potential for us to be reevaluated by Moody's, we need to have these financial policies in place because we're rated on it. And if we don't have financial policies, then we get dock points. So it's really good to have these in place. And as mentioned earlier, the auditors have on various management reports, I think over the last 3 years or so, have mentioned that there's a few of these policies that are really vital.
So this is currently in draft form. And where do we go from here? When you say some of these are really vital, are there some that should be identified? Are there some questions within these recommendations are these all recommendations that you have made, or are there discussions we need to have based on these recommendations, and really, when it says this policy was adopted on such and such a date, that's for the Board of Selectmen to adopt. So are you looking for recommendations for us in advance, or where do we go from here?
Recommendations and support, because essentially as a financial body within the community, your fiduciary responsibility is to make sure that we're in line with these policies and making sure that we're held accountable to these policies. A lot of the times, I know Bill has mentioned on a couple occasions, year end, these are the policies that held us accountable. This is what we have structured. This is what we are striving for. So from my perspective, it was more of making sure that the finance board provided their input based upon what we do in our roles, and essentially give us some guidance as to what you think needs to be changed, what you think is unrealistic, what you think maybe we shouldn't put in the policy. And so when we have that conversation with the Board of Selectmen, you're there to also support us moving in that direction.
I only had one change after I read them through. I just wanted to add that when we have grants, and there has to be annual reports sent in or monthly reports to the body that gave the grant, that they include you, the town administrator, and if they don't have to provide anything for the grant, that they still provide you a report annually. That's the only change I had after reading through all of that. Other than that, I'd be happy to take a vote and vote yes on all of these. I think they were lovely.
Yeah,
Because I thought that, I know we feel the same way, so I thought that there was something in there about that.
Yeah, it says they have to provide a report to like,
this is what we added based upon a potential edit. But I don't know if there was something, if that's duplication based upon something that was already written.
yeah, the project manager will copy the town administrator. Perfect. Monthly, quarterly, and annually.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it.
So ideally, we would, I feel like I personally read these briefly, knowing that we were going to have a discussion tonight about them. I personally would not want to vote. I mean, if everybody else feels that they want to, and if anybody wants to make a motion, then that's fine. I would abstain personally, but I'd also think it would be reasonable if the timeline works for you. And since we have several members missing tonight, that we take the time between the next meeting and really read the goals, the policies thoroughly, and make sure that we have given it the diligence that I think it requires. I think that a policy, I just think there's a lot of policies in here, and I think that it should be really reviewed
You want to wait till the next meeting?
carefully, if
There's
that
no rush.
works.
There isn't a
No,
rush?
there's
Okay.
definitely no rush.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just a matter of trying to make sure that we're having these conversations in relation to the budget cycle, because they all pertain to the budget cycle. Capital planning, forecasting, and just as we had mentioned, our day-to-day operation, whether it be grants, reconciliations, turnover, whether or not we're keeping our reserves, all the things that we're talking about during the town meeting process. How much should we keep aside? How much free cash? All of that type of stuff comes into these conversations, and so now is the time to have a discussion about them. So no, there no way are we saying you must vote to approve or vote to support, but I mean, it's something that I think that we need to stop putting on the back burner, and I think it's something that we need to address.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's really important. I think that there's a lot of important information. And I think that, again, it's something that we've been waiting to have a town administrator in place to be able to start to really put these procedures together. So I'm thrilled. I will commit to reading them thoroughly and carefully, and I'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting, and we can follow up from there. And it will also be interesting to have had them fresh and clear in our mind as we go through this budget season. A lot of what we do in our budget is reactive because we're just doing what we can. And I really look forward to being able to say, well, this is our goal. Whether we have the means to meet our goals will prove over time, but I think to have the goals in place and to say this is where we're trying to get toward, I think is a important thing. I think it's a great step, so thank you. So I'll put that on the agenda for our next meeting as well. And then the next item is a doozy. It's the capital plan. It's a labor of love. I know it is.
So I'm not sure if any of you watched the Board of Selectmen meeting, but I was able to present what we had initially put together for our 5-year capital improvement plan. This first page you'll see is a summary of the projects, the department, the categories, expected life, the blank column, the funding source, and then some suggestions in terms of which years that these projects should be considered for funding. The next page I'm going to skip over for now, but then we go into our debt overview. The town accountant had put together this spreadsheet, and we're using it as a way to kind of narrow down what we had been working with our Hilltop Securities, with our debt management company, and the next page will tell you why. But this gives you a brief summary of exactly the projects, the principal, the interest, the debt, whether it's excluded or non-excluded, and it gives you a breakdown of such and the total debt that the town is currently holding for this fiscal year. This spreadsheet is the one that was worked on with our bonding company, so you'll see it's a lot more in detail, and it goes over the course of the life of the project and many years out, depending on what it is that we're looking at. As you scroll down, you'll get into the regional school district and the debt that we have currently for both either the elementary school and or the middle high school. And then some of our other short-term debt that we have for our radios and some other equipment. The next sheet gives you a little bit more in terms of a general overview, but again, we thought it was a little overwhelming, so that's why we did that summary page. But it gives you an understanding of how the debt is going to fall off over the course of the next few years. The next chart gives you more of an understanding of the difference between the exempt, non-exempt, and self-supporting. Then we go into our fleet inventory, identifying the condition of such. We have a lot of older highway equipment. We have the luxury of having an employee who is a great mechanic and very handy and good at what he does, so he's been able to keep our fleet alive for quite some time, but most of our inventory seems to be in good condition. We did the same for our equipment. Again, highway is one of those noted. We went through and we looked at all of our properties, and this is one of the conversations that we had, is that some of our properties haven't really necessarily been inventoried in terms of a capital improvement standpoint. The cemetery building up on Main Street hasn't really necessarily been evaluated for whether or not it needs new windows or ventilation or anything of that nature. The same with Washington Hall. It is leased. We did spend a significant amount of community preservation funds on revitalizing that building. So we don't really have an inventory on what needs to be done. The same with the garden club. So we have a few buildings that we had, and that was all taken from the database that we talked about previously that the former finance director had put in place, Dude Solutions. So they had come out and done a very comprehensive audit of our buildings. The next is the capital improvement plan that was provided by the school. So this is what they had submitted in terms of their plan for moving forward, or what they think that the town should focus their efforts on. The bottom, as we had discussed, the Pentucket Regional School State of the District, they had mentioned all of the projects that they had completed for each of the town elementary schools, because we had mentioned quite frequently that we hadn't been told what was done, what was completed. So they had put together a list. Some of these projects were done by the town, some of the projects were done by the school, but essentially it gives you an understanding of how we've been working on things. We've identified a couple of things under $10,000 as a, capital plan, as we talked about, some of them being HVAC related. We took a look at the ARPA projects and those that we had funded, and then identified those that would fall under the capital threshold. And then we move forward into the individual pages, so you'll see exactly what's being requested by each department, a photo or a plan or something to show you exactly what the need is. And then lastly, when we circle back to the beginning, you'll get that revenue page. And the revenue page is giving you an estimate of what we predict free cash to be. It's giving you the balance of the stabilization fund as of 7/1 and the capital stabilization fund. It's giving you a balance of the American Rescue Funds as allocated as of 10/1. And then working with the town accountant, we were able to find out that there's a couple of other accounts that have monies that are not utilized, that we could be utilizing from the bond premiums and from the sale of the town buildings, which ironically is the sale of the old town hall, which happened back in 1979. So we've been holding that on the books.
So there's proceeds from the old town hall that's been sitting somewhere?
It's been collecting interest, but we're sitting in a receipts reserve fund.
So we essentially have the ability to utilize that on capital projects. So we're looking at about $2.9 million that obviously we wouldn't use all of that or all of the free cash, but monies that could be utilized for capital projects. You look very confused.
Not confused, skeptical. You're telling me that there's a pile of money that's been sitting around here since 1979, and no one has found it before today?
Today, and I have brought it up in past years. And I don't know if just budget season's very busy, if it gets forgotten about, but it hadn't been used, so
It
it continues to sit, and I continue to say, hey, we have this money in this receipt reserve fund. And they say, okay, but you have to look up laws, we had to figure out what building was sold. Because
That was
it's
a process.
Foreclosure, if the town took someone's property for foreclosure and then sold it, there's a different set of rules than if it was town property.
So this is the old town hall that's over by Dr. Dark's office?
Yeah.
And there may be a portion of monies that was from the Precinct 1 fire station that is now owned by John Valls.
So I guess I missed that in the 2 meetings in the 6 years I was selectman.
I
So
don't present it to
can
me.
is that validated? Does somebody have a piece of paper that says you have X amount of dollars in this account?
Yeah, it's a
in
bank
this
statement.
It's in my ledger, and my ledger matches the bank.
Do you have a
It's
bank
been
statement?
No, it doesn't, my ledger accounts wouldn't match a bank account exactly unless it had to have legally a separate bank account. But when I started here, it was sitting in that account. I did not create that account. It's been around just collecting interest. I have mentioned it to past, whoever was starting the capital talk. Just in passing, it was not you have to use this money. And I had mentioned the bond premiums as well. I mean, those did come on when I was here. I don't think it's like a fault. I don't think anyone intentionally just said, Oh, yeah, that money, I think they just got into the budget process and forgot about it.
So when you say your ledger, what do you mean by your ledger?
My general ledger.
Your general ledger. So on your books, you have an account line that
We have a
says,
special revenue fund.
that has a balance in it.
Yeah, it's called the Receipts Reserved for Appropriation Fund, so that's where like those wetlands receipts goes. We get like, what, $200 a year in TNC, transportation tax. That's where that goes. Anything that legally has to go in there, the bond premiums that were not used to reduce the debt had to go in there, because you have to use them for capital projects or to pay down debt. And that was one of the accounts that have been in there.
Okay, so I get all that, going through a couple of audits right now, and my ledger can say anything it wants on my balance sheet, but at the end of the day, my auditors say, okay, you say you have $1 million in this account, X. Prove it. Show us the support that supports this $1 million balance. So what I'm asking is, if we don't have a bank statement or something in writing that supports your number outside of your number, we don't have that number, right? Am I missing
My
something?
ledger is support enough. There
No, the ledger isn't.
would never say.
The ledger doesn't
"We
support.
don't have this money."
No, the ledger, I can make up any number I want on my general ledger to support that. You know, like Palmerlot did that years ago, right? They said
I
they
would
had $1
have to
billion
go back
in the
and find
Azores
trial balances
on
from
their,
1978 that I,
yeah, I know, but again, Palmerlot said they had $1 billion in the Azores years and years ago, right? And when the auditors, this new set of auditors, start looking for the $1 billion, they said, this is a made-up number. You don't have $1 billion, and guess what? You're out of business.
all of my funds match how much cash we have in the bank. Every single one, down to the penny,
Including this.
including that.
So it's mixed.
But it is not in its own bank account because it legally does not have to have its own bank account.
So it's mixed
It's
with
in
other,
general
it's
fund
mixed with
bank
other
account.
money. Uh-huh.
And we have traced it back to the sale of those buildings when this structure was created. An auditor would never come in and say that we can't use that money for capital. As long as we follow chapter 44, section 63.
I don't care how we use it, I just want to make sure I actually have to use it.
We do. I'm sure of it. It's been a little pet peeve of mine for quite some time now.
So that's essentially what we have in terms of what we've identified. And then we have our main sheet. And I know that in presenting it to the Board of Selectmen, the main thing was, well, we can't possibly fund all of these projects, which is very true. And, you know, just taking a look at the large debt exclusion that the town just took on in terms of the Pentucket Regional School, bonding at this point in time, I don't think is necessarily the way to go or recommend. However, having had the American Rescue Funds, which are, you know, need to be dedicated by 2024 and spent by 2026, they can't be held over for rainy day. They will eventually will lose them if we don't utilize them. Additionally, any type of use of those funds for operational funds is just obviously poor management practice. We also have some free cash, and in historic years we've used free cash to fund the cruiser every year that the police put on, and so some of the smaller items tend to be things that we might be able to address without taking a huge or making a huge impact to our free cash. So between a mixture of those and potential use of those additional funds, we believe that we'd be able to fund the projects as identified for 2024 and as requested.
As requested by departments,
By the departments.
and they're fine with this. There's not people saying, why not? Why do I have to wait?
So there was a couple,
Or
everything
there
that,
are, but they understand.
so everything that came
plan.
in, everyone said, I want it in 2024. And I said, well, that is great, and I would love to give you everything because I like to see things happen and I like to get things done.
Right.
But that is not realistic. So what do you need now? And so these were the projects that we came up with now. Like the chief would like to have the Jaws of Life. He would like to have his new command vehicle, and he would like the doors to be done, and he'd like a new roof. But obviously, he can't have all of that. So when I talked to him about it, I said, what is it that you need? And he's like, well, based upon the car accidents that we've seen in the last few months even, we need a pair of Jaws because we do not have them, and we have to wait until Georgetown arrives to have the
We
Jaws.
have none? I thought we funded this no, did not?
So they were not funded. So that's why a lot of departments think that these are smoke and mirror type of things because they ask for things and they're not identified as funding. So I wanted to put that column as a funding source so people understood that we are allocating a certain amount of funds for it, or we just simply don't have the funds and we're not funding it. We believe these are important projects. We want you to seek grant money. We want you to seek other funding sources, but unfortunately, there's nothing that we can fund as part of the free cash or debt exclusion or anything of that nature, or proposing to do. So there was a couple of conversations that I had a conversation with Chief Valentine, like I just mentioned. I had a conversation with Rennie. He had a couple of items that he wanted for vehicles. Like we had mentioned, his fleet is aging. He needs some updates. But one of the things he had mentioned that was really important as of now is that the trail is soon to be finished, and the maintenance of the trail is going to fall on the highway department as well as volunteers. But one of the things that would make it a lot easier for them to go and to mow and to take care of things was to do what they call a trackless tractor that allows them to attach an arm, and the arm will get over the turtle fence, and so that they can essentially mow the lawn and make sure it doesn't get overgrown. It will also allow them to plow the trail during the winter. So it just gives them a lot of different uses, and not just for the trail, but outside on the town. They have a Bombardier tractor that I guess they're using for the sidewalks that is just not what it used to be. So they need something that's a little bit more versatile, and this is something that they can utilize both for the trail and that. So again, he was willing to say maybe we don't move forward with the the highway yard, the structure that they use is needs some repair. There's the bottom of it is rotting, and there's some of the photos that we had shown. So he was saying that could be pushed off until the next fiscal year. This is more important for this current fiscal year. So there's conversation. So obviously there was compromise made with those individual departments.
And that takes care of this year, and you feel comfortable that as time goes on, we'll be able to fund the capital going forward as well?
Comfortable in the sense that I think that we're trying. I think that we're identifying the projects that we need. We're keeping them on the list. We're going to show how we're working towards a goal. I want to work with departments to identify grant opportunities. So while the town has voted on a capital plan, or the Board of Selectmen as the CIC, and then also the town at town meeting, that we're identifying these projects that if we are able to find funding, these are the projects we want to see happen. And I think that by continuing to keep them on and continuing to show that we're making a good conscious effort, then that is progress than what we've seen in the past. So whether or not I think there's funding, I'm not too sure, but I think that we're
Time will tell. It's a start, and it can be an ongoing concern and a reprioritization effort. And at least if it's documented, then you have somewhere to go. I had two other. So obviously this underground tank is a primary concern.
Only because of the fact that we continue to generate costs for something we're not using. So we're not using it, we've replaced everything, but it needs to be removed. So we have to get it inspected because it's sitting on the site. So we continue to spend money on something that's not connected. So in order to prevent having to be any wasteful spending, we think it would be best to just take it
Make
off
it
the
go.
site. So that's why there's no real useful life or anything of that nature. And that's why, as one of the funding sources, it was more of an ARPA-related expense instead of like a capital expense, because as we know, under the capital improvement plan, it needs to be over $10,000, and it needs to have a useful life of over 3 years.
So one other question I had about the fleet inventory. So in determining the condition, is that does the fire department determine their condition, and does the highway department determine their condition, or is there some sort of, you know?
Independent arbiter?
Yeah. Just curious.
No, there's no, well, I mean, I guess, no, it is information that as we send out for the capital improvement plan, we ask for an asset inventory, and they're the ones filling it out. So yes, they would be the ones determining what condition the equipment and or vehicle is in.
I don't know anything about fleet, and I just want to make sure that it is independent, and that, you know, just because somebody says, I want all new, my stuff is aged, well, is it, or is it more aged than another department? Are we really looking at a fair?
And age isn't the only factor, because if you take it into consideration.
Condition,
like
condition.
Cruisers,
Yeah.
we cycle out one cruiser because the cruiser is running for an extensive amount of time. And so after a certain amount, they could be relatively new, and we refurbished one of them recently, and now the highway superintendent is using one of the old cruisers. So there are, like, but he doesn't drive it nearly as much as the police officer would. So it's just one of those things where, you know, use plays a heavy role. And like we said too, that, you know, Bill Green has been phenomenal at what he does, and being able to fix vehicles and keep them in great condition or working condition for as long as he has. So I think, like you said, it's kind of like a twofold effort.
Right. So, okay. Anyone have any other questions?
I know what you're getting at, though. You don't want them refereeing their own game.
Yeah.
It goes back to the same thing I think we say every year, is that when we do wage and classification studies, we don't want them done, you know, by the employee. We want them to be, you know, that's why it was so important to have the one done that we did, you know, same kind of concept.
Yep. But it's a tough call. I mean, nobody is closer to their equipment than the men and
Agreed.
women using it every day. So, you know, somewhere along the line, you have to take that leap of faith that they're making choices in the best interest of the town. Some of them live in the town, so you'd hope they'd have their own best interest at heart as well when they develop some of these things, because, you know, it will hit their own pocket if not.
I know.
So,
But we all want new stuff. I mean, that's natural.
Yeah.
And I can't blame anybody for it. I think that part of our job is to make sure that we prioritize as a whole, that we are looking at a, you know,
and that we absolutely demand that we get the greatest value for every single penny,
Right.
hard-earned penny spent for
Right.
the taxpayers and the citizens out there. Because I know how darn hard I work for my money every day, and I can't believe that none of you out there work any less hard than I do. And you've got a lot of people in this town on fixed incomes.
I
They
know.
have Social Security, and if they're lucky, they have a pension to subsidize that. And other than that, they don't have the opportunity to earn more income.
I
They're
know.
locked in. So we have to have their interest in heart as well, and understand you know, there is a demographic in this town that lives under those circumstances. We have to be cognizant of that fact, and you know, try to make sure that we demand the greatest value we can.
Agreed.
Any other questions, or?
No, I think it's
If
great.
not,
We can
that-
take a deep dive into this.
I mean, I have to say, I know that this was a collaborative effort. I know that you asked for a lot of information and everybody shared it, and I think it is a great product, and I think that, I know it's going to be a living document. But to have all this information consolidated and coordinated and in a clear, productive manner, I think it's a really, really great exercise. It was more than an exercise. I know it was a massive effort.
But there's still much room for improvement. As soon as I get some more direction in terms of the Board of Selectmen and yourself and figuring out whether this works, I would like to then again filter it through all of the departments and all of the employees. And as we had discovered, like, there are some of the smaller items that, you know, offices might need, and I want them to add that to that list. I mean, obviously, included as part of our capital, but it should be included as part of a list. So I do want to have more input from the department staff as well to add to it. So it will be, like you said, a living document, and it will continue to have more data added to it as we move forward, because it was just such a huge undertaking. I mean, poor Ellen, I've talked to her about, like, I'm like, well, how do I do this? And where should I put this? And there's too much information. Like,
Yeah.
it really is harder to kind of get you to see it all in one place. So it does need improvement, but I really do think it's a good start.
The hardest part of any building any home is the foundation. And I think you've built a great foundation. It's a great tool. I think you're going to be able to expand on this easily, because you put it in a great format to be expandable and to be analyzed, and to be manipulated. So kudos.
Thanks.
Good work.
A great job.
Can't wait to pick it apart now. If I find any shortcuts, I'll let you know.
That'd be great.
If I can wire it up anyway, make it easier for me, I'll send you
That would be great.
And so for the plan for the 24 fiscal year, the funding mechanisms for those are still to be discussed.
Yes.
Whether it's
Because they'll ultimately
free
have
cash
to
or
be
ARPA or what.
exactly voted on by a town meeting, except for ARPA, obviously.
Can we talk about that Jaws of Life? Because I could swear that when I was on capital improvement, it was a few moons ago, but I still have a pretty good memory, that was one of their priorities. And I could have sworn
I
that
know there was a discussion.
we were like adamant, yeah, you have to have that piece of equipment, absolutely. And it was $30,000, and I'm just amazed that it didn't happen.
So we're not replacing one, where we don't have one.
Well, we have one set.
Okay.
I can't even read that in my reader. So we have 1.5 sets, but they're 30 years old.
No, I didn't sit on the cap.
and
30
And
years
I
ago.
remember even when I started that we had mentioned Jaws.
I'll look
Would you
through
like to
my
join
old
us?
notes,
Not today.
because I keep everything. I'm just like stupid like that. Just it's a job of my memory.
I
but-
remember it being a conversation, and I remember the chief standing up at one of the Board of Selectmen meetings talking about it when I think it was even when Denise was here.
Yeah, I'll bet you, Bet's husband, Kevin, remembers, because he was on the capital improvement with me. He remembers that conversation. I remember like it was yesterday that you don't have one of these, or, that's crazy.
I only have what they provided, which was that they do have 1.5 sets, but they are close to 30 years old.
I get it. No, well, I'll check my stuff.
And I do know at the most recent accident, they had to wait for Georgetown to use the Jaws.
Yeah, that's unacceptable.
Right.
You got somebody in that kind of condition, milliseconds mean everything.
Great. Love it. Excellent job. Thank you. So we talked briefly, Rebecca, while you were getting your items set up.
I apologize.
No worries. A member had talked about just that we should have discussions about the impact of inflation on this year's operating budget. Everybody knows that we're under an inflationary cycle, and I think we just want to make sure that we're aware of it and that we are not going to experience any surprise. I'm sure that you are aware of it and you're seeing bills and staying on top of it.
We are, but even as we experience this budget cycle, we're starting to see things, and based upon our estimates, go up a little bit depending on how the economy goes. So we try and take that into consideration, but obviously we don't want to take away utilizing other revenue funds and cutting other people down. I mean, so we are monitoring our current budget situation and the impact of it, and because of such, we are overinflating some of our other numbers. But again, with everything that's happening and whether or not the new growth is going to come in and offer us any relief and
Yeah.
what the school is going to do, we're really looking at some really scary times.
Well, recent indicators are that inflation is leveling off. I mean, So that's good news. But we'll just have to keep a close eye. I mean, the big item would really be heat, fuel for the fleets and stuff. Other than that, you know, I mean, what
Just
else
the
isn't
maintenance.
fixed?
Repairs cost of parts right now is skyrocketing if you can find them. Labor is going up in just about every corner of the market, just because of competitive factors with inflation. And even if inflation is steadying out, you're still looking at an 8% growth. So that should be factored into most of your expense items, 8% minimum. And then if you come short of that, praise the Lord. But, you know, it's hard to say. You know, one more bomb goes off in the Ukraine, price of oil jumps $30 a barrel. Nobody has control over that. You're just going to have to react to it and find the extra money somewhere to fuel the police, the fire, the highway, whatever. I mean, you know, we're kind of all, you know,
We're
basically.
fortunate to be on, you know, have the Groveland Municipal Light Plant, but even their rates are gonna increase. I mean, not nearly as much as National Grid for the other communities nearby, but factor that in and, you know, what that's gonna do. And I've heard some different stories about the impact to the grid and increased usage, and, you know, there's been even crazy talks of blackouts and things of that nature. So the issue is quite large, which from a budgeting standpoint, in terms of trying to figure out exactly what you do, it's, Ellen and I have,
You're not alone. I mean, my gas budget went up 70% when I finally came to, and you know, because I thought it was a misprint. You know, they verified, no, they said, hope for a warm winter. That was their, you know, or, you know, solution.
Right.
Now I go light a candle every night and pray for a warm winter. I mean, you know.
so yes, we are taking that into consideration.
Plan next meeting and agenda. We already talked about the next meeting to hold the 21st. Aside from our meeting on, oh, that's interesting. We have a meeting on November 21st and then December 21st. That could be confusing. So our meeting on November 21st, if the finance board does not end up with a full quorum, then we just cancel our public meeting and attend as guests. I just know that tonight ended up being, there's 4 of us, and that's our quorum, and the 21st being next week, seeing that we have a meeting this week, and then we have another meeting next week. It's off cycle, it's off schedule. I'm just trying in my mind to anticipate if I don't end up with a full quorum.
I mean, essentially, you'd be violating open meeting rules by participating as the finance committee. So obviously, the Board of Selectmen,
Only if we, no, if we don't have quorum, then
speaking as an individual,
speaking as an individual, but
gets a little tricky. That's why it would be really great that we had a quorum.
it would be really great
I
if
know.
we had a quorum at every meeting, but we're relying on people's private time, and people do what they can do. And I ask nicely. I try to understand that people have lives outside their advisory role here, and sometimes we have quorum and sometimes we don't. If we have 2 open seats, if anybody would like to join the board and, you know, give us 2 more bodies so that we don't have this as much of an issue,
So then why
then
don't we post
that
2
would be
separate
nice.
like 2 separate like agendas? Like 2 separate, I mean, like a joint meeting, but you have your own agenda. So that you can cancel your meeting, because I would hate to have like a joint meeting and then you don't have a quorum and then we'd have to cancel the meeting. And then we haven't advertised accordingly.
Yeah, last time we had it as two different meetings. We posted them as two different meetings, and we in fact had to cancel ours. That's why it's coming to mind for me.
So that would be my only thought process, is that I
Okay.
would hate for the Board of Selectmen not to be able to carry on with their normal business because there wasn't advertised as a joint meeting and there's lack of a quorum. I can double check with town council, obviously. There might not be an issue, but
Just
I'd
post two
rather err on the
meetings.
side of caution.
I would think if we could post two meetings and, you know, I often, as a lot of us often attend the Board of Selectmen meeting and participate as appropriate. So, if we don't have quorum, I hope we do, and I've made everybody aware of the meeting, and I hope that we do, but if we don't, then I would think it would revert back to a similar situation where we're attending a Board of Selectmen meeting as,
I just meant put it as an agenda item, so joint session with the Finance Board, joint session with the Board of Selectmen, you both have your own agendas, and
okay.
if it doesn't
I'll-
work, then you'd be like, we'll skip over this session since the Finance Board does not have a quorum, and we'll continue on with our normal business as on our agenda. That kind of thought process.
But then we wouldn't have a joint meeting with them at all, correct?
Well,
Okay.
We would have a representative conversation.
Okay.
I mean, ideally, we won't be in that situation.
I will be there. I can
But-
tell you now.
Well, I will too, but, you know, we do what we can do. We're an advisory board. I call the meetings, and if people come, they come. I mean, it's where we are. It's how it goes.
You can't account for what happened tonight with someone just suddenly not
Somebody
feeling
was
well.
sick, and
That could happen in a matter of
somebody else
seconds.
had a childcare issue, and
You can't plan for that.
I don't blame people for that either, because
No.
I think if you blame people for that, then you box people out from the role altogether, and then you have less participants. So I understand that life happens, but
who's blaming?
No one's blaming anybody. More members would solve our
nobody's
issue.
blaming anybody. That's exactly the point,
Sign
is
up.
that
We
no
have
one's
so much
blaming
fun here once
anybody.
a month. Come on.
But we'll just do our best to make the quorum, and we always, which we've always done. So, and I'll just make sure that everybody knows how what our counts are. So, so that is that. We already tabled the meeting minutes. We already planned our next meeting, and I'll follow up with our group on an email for that. Other items not reasonably anticipated? Anybody have any other items or anything to follow up on?
Oh, I'm on, okay. I went to the Council on Aging meeting this morning. They, are looking to kind of have a, I don't know how I would want to phrase this, but, I know, some members to help them in their search committee for hiring a new director. So I am asking if I can be on their search committee to help find their new director. I know that they asked a Board of Selectmen member, which will go on the agenda on Monday. Rebecca is involved. Hopefully they have some newly appointed representatives, just to have a more collaborative effort with a more broader range of people, not just the Council on Aging Board themselves.
Sure. So has there been a search, this is talk of establishing a search committee. There is not a search committee established as of
They have
yet.
2 members now, and they just felt like it wasn't, that they didn't want to carry the responsibility just themselves, that they wanted more input from the town administrator, Board of Selectmen, Finance Board, so all of that, and just to bring it, more people involved, the better to review this. They just felt like it was a lot of pressure just for 2 of them to have that responsibility. So, but they have resumes, so they want to move forward with all of that information.
So is there a typical different protocol for adding other people to the search committee? Is there,
So it's different. So underneath their bylaws, they have the ability to make a sub-personnel committee. And they can they can appoint up to 3 members of their board, and they can attend to personnel matters and making recommendations to the Council on Aging for an appointment of a position. So what they're recommending is a little different, similar to what was done with the town administrator search, where they're looking for 2 members of the Council on Aging, a member of the Board of Selectmen, a member of the Finance Board, and members of the public to be part of this committee to make a recommendation. So I'm still researching exactly who makes the appointment, because it's not the sub-personnel committee that is listed in their bylaw. But it also was what they had done prior, when they, it wasn't it was a director before, Amanda Fisher. They had something similar. But does that mean it was right? I'm not sure. And so that's why I'm looking into it.
so would it be appropriate to say that as this committee is formed, should they seek a member of the finance committee, that we make a motion to have Sarah be our representative? So I just made a motion to have Sarah be our representative. Should the search committee seek a member of the finance board? Any other further discussion from anybody? No? So, I mean, if you have the time and you've been attending, I know that you've been showing up and keeping yourself informed, so I think that's great. Thank you. So take a vote. Yes?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, and you're abstaining?
She knows what she's
Okay.
getting into.
So 3 yes and 1 abstention, so Sarah would be our representative.
That's if
Right,
this
if everything-
all squares
yeah.
with,
And if
So it
not-
would either be, I'm thinking that it would be, because the Board of Selectmen have the ability to create a committee, that it would be an
Yeah.
appointment of the Board of Selectmen, but I'm not certain. So that's why I want to make sure that it's not under the COA's purview
Yeah.
within their bylaws, that they're able to create that additional committee outside of the bylaw, allowing them to just do the 3.
Right.
I'm just clarifying that portion.
Sure,
good point.
yep.
Don't want to do anything against the law.
No.
We don't, and I think whether they're seeking, whoever that body would be comprised of, whether it's select board, finance board, other residents of the town, however it be comprised, should they seek a member of the finance board? Now, we have one, so I think that's a good way to go about it. Since we don't have another, formal meeting for a month, we may as well plug that in there, so. Good. Anything else? Anybody? No?
I'm out of things.
Very good.
Rebecca, do you have anything you want to tell us about? Okay,
No? Ellen?
Ellen?
No? Do you really have $84,000? I'm just kidding.
Are you sure?
I'm gonna put it on the sheet.
Motion to adjourn at 7:04.
I'll second. Oh,
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
thanks.
You get what I'm saying, though? I'm not